Good evening. I'd like to welcome everyone, members, officers and members of the public to this meeting of the Planning Control Committee. Before the meeting starts, I'd like to invite Committee Clerk Caroline Jenkins to explain how proceedings will work. Thank you, Caroline.
Thank you, Chair. Just want to make sure that we've got one remote attendee tonight. Kerry, can you hear us okay? Okay, all right, I'll carry on. Okay, so the rules of debate. If a member wishes to speak, they should use the speak button located on the microphone unit. The microphone will light up green and the chair will be alerted of your request to speak. When the chair invites you to speak, your microphone will be made live and will turn red, at which point you can speak. When the public participants are invited to speak, their microphones will be made live by the committee officer. When requested to vote, voting will be via the yes, no, abstain buttons on your microphone unit. Details of how members voted will be shown on the screens around the rooms and the result will be visible on the YouTube stream. If in the event of a tied vote, the chair will have the casting vote. So are there any questions before we start the meeting? I'll hand back to the chair.
Thank you, Caroline. One, apologies for absence. I've received apologies from councillors Ian Moody, Sean Nolan and Terry Tyler. Having given due notice, Councillor Michael Muir will substitute for Councillor Moody and Councillor Dave Winstanley will substitute for Councillor Nolan. Are there any further apologies? We haven't got Councillor Muir at the moment, have we? The minutes of the 7th of March 2024. I propose that we take as read and approve the minutes of the meeting held on the 7th of March 2024, the true record of proceedings. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Tyson?
Yes, I'm happy to second that.
Any comments on the minutes? So shall we go to the vote, Caroline, please?
That vote is carried, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Item 3, notification of other business. There is none. Item 4, Chair's announcements. 1, recording. In accordance with council policy, this meeting is being recorded. The recording will be available both on the council's YouTube channel as well as the council's ModGov site alongside the documents for this meeting. Item 2, declarations of interest. Members are reminded to make declarations of interest before an item. The detailed reminder about this and speaking rights is set out under the Chair's announcements on the agenda. Item 3, to clarify matters for registered speakers. The Council have recently updated its speaking procedure for registered speakers at these meetings and should provide more time for members of the public to have their say on planning applications. I want to confirm this in detail. Members of the public in groups of supporters or objectors have up to 3 minutes per person. Where there's only one public supporter or objector, that member of the public will have 5 minutes. There are separate groups for people registered as member advocates, objectors and member advocate supporters, and the applicant, their agent or representative. This is up to 5 minutes per group. All speakers will receive a warning when you have 1 minute remaining. On the conclusion of your time, members will be invited to ask points of clarification. By members, we mean people on the first row. At the end of your allotted time, you'll be advised that the time allowed has ended and you must cease. Section 4.8.23a. For the purpose of clarification, in order to vote on an agenda item at this meeting, a member must be present for the entirety of the debate and consideration of that item. If a member leaves the room at any point of the item, they will not be able to vote. Public participation, we have Mr. Nick Brown. So we're now ready to go on to item 6. I will say at this point, if Councillor Muir arrives, it will not be able to participate or vote. So item 6, 23/01220/FP, Holborn Farm, Dane End, Thurfield. Tom Ray to present, please.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening to members of the committee. I do have a couple of items for updating, Chair, so if I could just run through those. Firstly, a supporting letter has been received from the applicant's planning consultant, and this has already been circulated to all members of the committee and uploaded onto the website. But briefly, the statement endorses the officer recommendation and the support of the conservation officer to the proposals. The statement also confirms that there is support for the provision of a new dwelling in this location under paragraph 84 of the National Planning Policy Framework, and that the proposals also meet with the criteria set out in 2 local plan policies, and those are CGB 1 and CGB 3 regarding development in the rural area beyond the Greenbelt. Mention is also made of a planning appeal in another district in the statement, in a similar rural location, where an appeal inspector allowed a dwelling, concluding that the harm arising from over-reliance on the private car was limited and outweighed by the provision of one dwelling in that particular case. So, Chair, just moving on to conditions, I'd like to just suggest a variation to some of the conditions as set out in the report. And the first one is condition 9, regarding the requirement for an energy statement. After further consideration, officers consider the wording of that condition should be changed to a pre-commencement rather than a first occupation trigger. The applicant has confirmed in writing that they're agreeable to this change to this to the wording of condition 9. With regard to further conditions, Chair, and having looked through the officer report further and consulted with the council's conservation officer, I'd like to suggest 2 additional conditions, and these are just really regarding matters of detail, and they are in respect of a roof light on the north-facing elevation and the provision of entrance door shutters on the main entrance, which is also on the north elevation. The applicant has also agreed to these pre-commencement conditions, and the detail are as follows. So this would be a potential condition 11, and it would read, notwithstanding the details shown on the submitted drawings, further details of the shuttering to the north-facing primary entrance shall be submitted to and approved in writing by the local planning authority prior to the commencement of works, and that the development shall be carried out in accordance with the approved details. And the second condition refers to the roof light on the north elevation. You may have seen from the officer's report that there was some slight concern about the size of that opening. So the revised condition would, or the new condition would read similarly to the condition that I've just read out, and that would be the submission of details of that roof light to be submitted and agreed by the local planning authority. There is one remaining condition which I would like to suggest a slight change to as well. This is not a pre-commencement condition, but it's just for further clarification, and that is condition 8 regarding the ecology and bat surveys. And with this particular application, the applicant has commissioned an ecology report and a preliminary bat roost assessment. In addition to that, later on last year, there was an emergence and activity bat survey document, which is important because it flags up suggested mitigation and enhancements. So I would recommend that the wording of condition 8 is also altered slightly to include the words and the emergence and activity bat survey dated June 2023. Thank you, Chairman. That's all in terms of updates. And now I will go through these slides if
Just-
I may.
Mr. Ellis, before I continue, can I just check with Kerry Monroe that we have got the reasons behind those conditions that she's clear about? There's a query from Kerry about the reasons behind these conditions. I just want to check that she's fine with that. Could you outline the reasons?
Yeah, of course, Chair. Yeah, the reason for condition A would remain the same as set out in the report, as would condition 9. And the additional conditions 11 and 12, the reasoning for those conditions would be the same in both cases, and that would be to safeguard the character and appearance of the listed building to which this consent relates, and to comply with policies SP 13 and HE 1 of the North Hertfordshire Local Plan 2011 to 2031.
Thank you. Please continue.
So if I could just go to the slides now, Chair. Thank you. So this slide shows the location of the site on the east side of Dane End. The site forms part of Holborn Farmhouse, which itself is a Grade 2 listed dwelling. The barn, the subject of this application, is shown shaded pink there on the plan, and is directly to the south of the farmhouse, and is separately Grade 2 listed. The barn is significant as a surviving 18th century threshing barn, being located within a farmstead with other historic structures. To the south of the barn are further farm buildings, which are separately owned, with 2 modern dwellings, Holborn Farm Bungalow and a property called Moss Wood. Next slide, please. So this slide is of Holborn Farmhouse itself, and it shows the farmhouse Grade 2 listed in the background, and the existing vehicular access into that farmyard, which will be shared with the new dwelling. The large lime tree in the foreground will be retained. Next slide, please. So this shows a similar photograph of the access, but looking southwards, and you'll see in the background there 2 pitched roof structures which are attached to the main barn. These structures will be removed as part of the planning application, and the soft verge there in front of the structures will be retained. Next slide, please. So this is the south elevation of the barn to be converted as viewed from Dane End. The photograph there shows the roof of the barn covered in a red pan tile, which are in good condition, and it is intended that those pan tiles will be removed and then replaced following the insulating of the roof space. The black cladding to the barn will also be removed and reused where possible. Next slide, please. This shows the elevation of the barn facing onto Dane End, and you'll see in the foreground there quite a poor quality brick-built stable block. That building is also proposed to be removed as part of the planning application and replaced with a double-bayed carport. Next slide, please. This is a photograph of a different angle, again looking at that poor quality stable building. You will see it has a it's highly prominent in Dane End, and has a quite an awkward junction with the the western end of the barn, to which is attached to. The proposal is to demolish that building, and the replacement carport will be set further away from the barn, and therefore better reveal the historic setting of the barn. Next slide, please. So this photograph is taken from the farmhouse to the north, looking back towards the listed barn, and you'll see the two structures on the left and the right, which are proposed to be demolished. Next slide, please. This is looking in more detail at one of those structures, an existing cart shed erected in the 20th century at some point, and that is also linked to the main barn. This structure will also be demolished and the hard surfacing there replaced with a better quality hard surfaced finish. Next slide, please. This is looking at the internal elevation of that stable block, which I mentioned earlier, also to be demolished. Next slide, please. This is the eastern end of the barn, the eastern gable, and the building to the left there, which is attached to it, that building will also be demolished. So there'll be 3 structures demolished, that particular structure there and the other 2 north-facing structures which we saw earlier. Next slide, please. This is the internal view of the main listed barn. It has 7 bays in the barn, and you see there from the quite excessive timber framing and roof trusses within the barn. A lot of the roof trusses are original. There has been some alterations to the barn over the years, but it maintains its historic character, hence its Grade 2 listing. Next slide, please. Another view looking eastwards along the barn. The proposed works will maintain the open character of this part of the barn. Next slide, please. And again, just another shot showing the dominant roof trusses there within the barn. Next slide, please. This is a typical view down Dane End. It varies in width from 3.5 meters to 5 meters with a soft verge, and is of it's a fairly flat lane. There is no significant incline at all within the lane. Next slide, please. And another view looking down Dane End. This is slightly wider part, and these are the dwellings on the left-hand side, which are just to the north of the barn. You'll see the barn in the very distance there, just popping up on the tree line. So these dwellings here form part of a group of dwellings in Dane End. Next slide, please. I'm showing this slide because this is the barn attached to Holborn Farmhouse, which has recently been the subject of conversion works, and you'll see where a similar approach has been taken there with the black stained timber cladding and sympathetic roof tiles. Next slide, please. And this is a photograph of that barn internally, and you'll show here where the applicant has endeavoured to maintain the historic character and show the timber framing as part of that residential conversion. This approach is exactly what is being proposed on the main barn opposite. Next slide, please. So this slide is showing the application site. You'll just see it on the bottom part of the plan there, edged in red, is the application site, and the proximity of the site to Thurfield Village, which is a Category A village, which has a number of facilities, including primary school, recreation ground, village hall, church, and a public house. And the approximate walking time from the site there, edged in red, to the village boundary is about 10 to 15 minutes. Next slide, please. This is a location plan showing the site with the groupings of buildings to the north, the residential properties. There are 3 or 4 there, and 2 houses to the south. Next slide, please. This is more detailed plan showing the existing building with its extensions to it, the 2 elongated buildings to the northwest and the flat roof building to the south. Next slide, please. So this is the demolition plan. So you'll see there picked out in red the amount of demolition which will leave the main barn will basically reveal its significance in a better way. Next slide, please. And this is the access proposals to the site. The applicant has within their control and ownership a very wide visibility display that meets highway standards. There is a hedge to the northern part of the site, which is within the control of the applicant, and the proposal is to trim back that hedge to achieve the best sight lines. Next slide, please. So this is the elevation looking at the main barn on the right there, with the proposed replacement building to the north. That building will provide bedroom accommodation with a single-story glazed link in between that and the barn to differentiate between the historic barn and the modern building. And the benefit of providing this addition to the barn is that the bedrooms can be provided in a modern building rather than within the barn itself, resulting in that barn being compartmentalized basically and losing the ability to see the timber framing. So the main barn itself will remain essentially open in appearance. Next slide, please. And this is the reverse of that elevation, showing the low pitched roof to that extension and the barn on the left. Next slide, please. This is the rear elevation of the barn. There's just one roof light in that elevation, and the openings along the ground floor there are inserted into places where there has been evidence of previous openings within the barn. Next slide, please. And this is the north elevation, and you'll see from that the quite low scale of the proposed northwards extension, and the carport on the right hand side, which is a predominantly open structure. The ridge to the barn will be raised by 150 millimeters. That's in order to require insulating material to be placed above the rafters, and then the roof will be relaid, and the sort of the varying contour of that ridge will be replaced as it is at the moment. There's just one roof light on this elevation as well. That's the one on the right, but that's the one that's subject of the condition which I referred to earlier on. Also, just on this, you'll see quite a large entrance door just to the bottom left-hand side of that roof light. The intention is to provide shutters to that entrance door to maintain the historic character of the building. Next slide, please. And this is the ground floor layout. So it's essentially a T-shaped with the carport on the left-hand side. The extension on the southern end of the barn is now removed, and all of that area becomes a garden associated with the new dwelling. Next slide, please. This is showing the proposal with the timber framing all remaining within the structure. The applicant has made it clear in the supporting statements that that there will be full intention is to retain that timber framing as it is, with any insulating works fitted between the rafters. Next slide, please. And this just shows the amount of timber framing in that barn. This is a drawing as existing, and as I say, the intention is to keep as much as possible of that timber framing. Next slide, please. And again, just a photograph showing the amount of unsympathetic extensions to the barn, which is supposed to be removed, which will be removed. Currently, the barn and its extensions has a footprint of 450 square meters. That will be reduced to 317 square meters. So there will be a significant loss of footprint of those unsympathetic extensions, and generally an enhancement to the setting of the barn. Next slide, please. That's it now, Chairman. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you very much. Any questions of Mr. Rowe? Councillor Peace?
Hello, can I just ask one question about condition 6, where it says for the works to go ahead, there either needs to be a licence issued by Natural England or a statement in writing from the relevant licensing body to the effect it doesn't need a licence. Who is the other relevant licensing body if it isn't Natural England?
Well, I think that would be if Natural England were not to exist at some point,
Oh, I
whoever
see.
replaces
Okay,
that authority.
that's fine. Thank you.
Councillor Tyson?
Thanks for that very thorough presentation, Tom. At one point, you were talking about the pan tiles, the roof tiles, and I just wanted to clarify because you actually said that they would be removed and replaced. Did you mean removed and reused?
Reused.
Yeah,
sorry,
okay,
sorry.
that's great. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? I've got a question, and I may have missed it, but is there a condition by which the fabric of the building and changes in it are recorded as expected by Historic England?
No, there is such a condition.
Right. Can I suggest that you may have to check on this after the meeting, because I think you'll find that I know it's not happened with the other buildings that we've seen. Let's see, according to Historic England, if there is a change in the fabric to a historic building, there needs to be a record of what the building is like to begin with, even with all its changes. Pictures of how it's being changed, and then the final. Because if you think about it, otherwise the whole thing is lost. So
The only point I'd say on that, the site isn't within an archaeological area.
it's not to do with archaeology.
Yeah. So you're suggesting like a building recording condition of
Yeah.
some kind. Yeah.
There is a separate list of building application, which is a delegated matter, and that deals with the actual structural works. This is an application for planning permission that is not delegated because of the objection from the Highways Authority. And so such a recording condition would probably better placed on the list of building consent rather than the planning permission.
Yes, please. Any other questions? Right, thank you. Can we go to our public speaker? Mr. Nick Brown, you've got 5 minutes when you're ready.
Sounds good. Thank you. Good evening. Thanks, Tom, for taking us through. So I'm the applicant. I'm the owner of Holborn Farmhouse, so the pink building you saw in the pictures, and working through the renovation of the attached barn that you also saw in the pictures. I moved there 2 years ago. I lived there with my family, so my wife, and we got a 4-year-old and a 4-month-year-old. We love living on Dane End. It's a very, very quiet lane. It doesn't really act as a through road to anywhere, so the traffic on Dane End is mainly for the residents and like delivery drivers going to and from people's houses. The barn itself, as you can see, is really, really beautiful. The timber frame on the inside, you saw the photos of, but the buildings attached to it are extremely ugly. So removing them and replacing them with one modern one, and then just clearing away the others is like a massive enhancement to people looking at the barn externally. Highways have raised their concerns, and we've taken quite a long time and I think gone to quite good lengths to try and demonstrate why we think it's safe to have an extra dwelling there, even though there's not a pavement. You saw Dane End. We've had like a traffic survey done where the average speed is between 20 and 25 miles an hour. My little boy learnt to ride his bike on that road. And my even littler boy, he gets walked up and down that road in his pram. So cars go very quietly. We don't think that one new dwelling will add significant traffic to the road. And we think it's a safe road to walk along or cycle along, if that's what the residents want to do. We're really keen to develop this because I think is the best thing for the barn. You've seen how much timber is in there, and the only way it will get like the love and attention it needs is to be converted into a house for a family to live in. And we're quite excited to do it because the plan is that my wife's sister and her young family will move in to be our neighbours, and live in hopefully an amazing converted barn. So I don't really have anything more to say other than very passionate about converting it, doing a really good job of it, and very happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Points of clarification, Mr. Brown. Councillor Levitt.
Thank you. Just as a little bit further explanation, there was on the plans we saw there was some alterations to the visibility in the entrance. So at the moment, so you're actually going to improve that entrance to what exists, so you can actually see a bit more than what you can at the moment. Because I would think that that stable block, wherever it sticks out, is quite obstructive of view.
Is the question about the view as you're kind of driving out the drive and seeing up the road? Okay, yeah. So if in the first picture, the first photo that Tom presented, you will have seen like a big green hedge. So that's on the north side of the drive as you were to drive out. So our traffic consultants, when we were trying to appease highways on the safety, suggested that to get a visible splay that is safe, we would basically take the top 2/3 out of that hedge, I think for about 10 meters to a tree. And that would mean as you're driving out, when you look to the right-hand side, you can safely see as much as needs to be safe on approaching cars.
Thank you.
Councillor Mason.
Thank you. Apologies if I've missed this somewhere. Obviously it was originally a farm, I would imagine. What was it last used as in terms of any sort of commercial or business use? Was it last as a farm, and when was that?
Good question. So it's quite interesting. We bought that property about 3 years ago, and we bought it from an elderly couple or an elderly lady at that stage, who then she has moved into the bungalow that is adjacent to the barn. And they used to, well, they still keep horses, but they used to keep more horses. So our understanding is the last time it was used to kind of be agricultural is part of their horses quite a few years ago, because I think at the end of their period in the house, they weren't living in the house anymore and they moved to the bungalow because they didn't have mobility. And now we use it just to store bits and bobs. So I'm not aware of when it was kind of commercially used previously.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you, Mr. Brown. Can I ask the officer to respond to any issues raised?
Thank you, Chair. Just on the visibility, the Highway Authority have not objected to the visibility displays per se. What they're objecting to is the location of a new dwelling and the issue of accessibility for pedestrians up and down day and end. So it's not an objection per se to the visibility displays, which can be provided in accordance with Manual for Streets.
Unpick that a bit more and give the members a bit more detail about that.
Yeah, there is a visibility requirement for any new development generating additional traffic, and the visibility displays that are required for motorists to see northwards and southwards can be met through the trimming back of the hedge, which Mr. Brown mentioned, and that's shown on one of the drawings which I presented earlier on.
Thank you. And so it is the actual siting of another dwelling there that.
Well,
highways
it's,
often.
yeah, it's the provision of a dwelling in a rural location, which the county council have an issue with from a sustainability point of view, rather than a physical issue regarding sight lines.
Thank you. Any other questions for the officer? Can I have a proposer, please? Councillor Levitt.
Thank you, Chair. In view of what's just been said, I'd sort of taken it that as the Highways Authority says about danger and everything like that, I'd assumed it was the visibility displays. I hadn't really read properly that it was purely the sustainability on that. In which case, this is rather a waste of our time being here this evening, actually, because I don't think highways really have any sustainable objections. So I move the recommendation, Chair.
Councillor Allen,
Happy to second, Chair.
thank you. So we've got a proposer and seconder to accept the application. Should we go to debate? Councillor Winstanley.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I can understand the highways concern if it was a development of a certain number of houses, but as it's only one further dwelling, I definitely don't. I agree. I don't think that's a sustainable objection.
Thank you. We did look at the map, didn't we, the other day, to look at what dwellings were around, and there are some, but not many. Councillor Pearce?
Have to agree with that. And I can imagine when this was used for agricultural use that there was considerably more traffic on that lane at that time. My only concern when I read this was the bats that are living in the barn, but that seems to be very adequately addressed by condition. So I'm happy to agree with it.
Thank you. Other contributions to the debate? Shall we go to the vote? Thank you, Caroline.
That is carried, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Caroline. So item 7 is planning appeals. Sean Greaves. Yes, Nick, unless you want to stay for planning appeals, please go.
Thank you, Chair. There's one appeal that we've received since the last meeting, and that's a written representations appeal for a single dwelling at Barley. And as far as appeal decisions are concerned, well, one isn't an appeal, we're reporting the decision of the Secretary of State relating to the called-in application for the solar farm at Great Wymondley, and the report sets out the reasoning of the Secretary of State in granting planning permission, contrary to the recommendation of the inspector, and there's a summary there to assist, because obviously if you've tried to read the actual decision, it's a very long decision letter. And then there's the dismissed appeal for erection of a 2-bedroom dwelling at Barley. That's another written representations decision. So unless members have any questions about one thing I'd like to mention is that last time I was asked how much it cost to attend the public inquiry. I quoted a figure of 91,000. That actually included VAT. So the actual figure is 78,000. We can claim the VAT back, I believe. So so it's just over 78,000. Okay.
Did you say we're going to get it back?
Oh, a VAT registered organisation can claim that back.
The VAT, not the 78.
No, not the 70. Unfortunately, not.
So it's
no.
78,000 plus officer time.
Plus officer time, yes. We've not given a figure to the officer time. There was a lot of officer time involved in the process, yes. That is that. There on the website, we have posted a recent letter that was submitted by the local residents association, which is called a judicial review pre-action protocol letter, which sets out a possible intention of the local residents association to challenge the Secretary of State decision in the High Court. That pre-protocol letter doesn't stop the judicial review application period, which is 6 weeks following the decision. So they have until around about the 22nd, but if you give them a couple of days for the Easter, 24th of April, they have to actually lodge a judicial review with the High Court. So that's giving an indication that they're thinking of launching a judicial review, and they've sent this to the Secretary of State, and that's available on the website if members want to have a look at that. And it sets out the reasons that they consider the Secretary of State was not correct in his decision. Okay. So I think it's a case of watch this space in regards to what happens there.
Before you continue, can I just take a question off Councillor Mason? Pick up.
Councillor Mason needs to take a deep breath first.
I think it's like this one.
Just to clarify, I'm probably stating the obvious, but for the record, I want to make sure. So, as a committee, we accepted that proposal. So, if I understood it was the Secretary of State who'd called it in. So, who called it in if it wasn't the Secretary of State?
No, the Secretary of State called in the application for him to consider it, and therefore took the power away from us, this council, to determine the application. There was a public inquiry held, which was held by the inspector who considered the matter, and he set out in great detail what his view was. It is a matter of planning judgment when we come to these things, and obviously substantial weight was given to the benefits of delivering renewable energy, and as set out in the Secretary of State's decision, this one solar farm would deliver the electricity energy needs of the 31% of the dwellings in the district, which is quite significant. So those are all matters that are set out in there. As to the reason for the Secretary of State calling it in the first place, I'm not able to shed any light on that, but that was the decision of the Secretary of State at that time. But after considering all the matters and the inspector's report, etc., the Secretary of State decided in the end to grant planning permission. So that's where we are, and we do have a body that's considering launching a judicial review in the High Court. Now, judicial review can't relate to matters of planning judgment. A judicial review will only consider whether the Secretary of State erred in law, didn't consider something that you should have done or whatever. The courts do not consider planning matters in terms of making a planning judgment on a decision, but any errors in law in terms of the process and the decision letter. So that's where we are at the moment on that.
Thanks, Sean. I have a supplementary question.
Carry on.
I remember another day when we came in here and sat down in here and discovered we were going to vote on another similar matter. And we were told we couldn't because the Secretary of State said we couldn't. I understood because of the ongoing appeal. So where do we stand with that? Or is that not allowed to be discussed?
Yes, the Secretary of State submitted to us a holding direction to enable him to consider whether he wished to call in that application, which is at Bygrave. After the deliberation of that matter, the Secretary of State sent a further letter saying he did not wish to call in that application, and therefore the power remains with this authority to determine that application. There has been some amendments and further information submitted as a result of this council's decision to defer making a decision. There are a number of reasons why the committee sought to defer, and work has been undertaken regarding that application, and we are intending to report that application back to Planning Control Committee at its next meeting on the 13th of June. All being well, is what my dad used to say.
Is it that the same thing?
It will reflect on that all being well. We'll be here to hear it.
Yes.
Councillor Levitt.
Yeah, what was going to be a similar thing about that other application is that the Secretary of State's decision will obviously influence the way that we look at the result, will it?
Each case is considered on its own merits. The Bygrave site is not within the Greenbelt, but we will be, as we carefully considered and reported on the Easter Great Wymondley application, we will do so on the Bygrave application, but it does not set any precedent one way or another to the committee's consideration of that application. As I say, each case on its own merits. Basically. So no, I don't think it should be considered as influencing one way or another a decision on the Bygrave application.
Thank you. Just for further clarification, should there be a judicial review, the costs are borne by the people calling a judicial review, are they? And there's unlikely to be a cost to this council?
Yes, the judicial review would be against the decision of the Secretary of State, not the council, and therefore it would be for the Secretary of State to appoint barristers to defend his decision. We have been named as an interested party, but there is no need for us to, if they do launch a judicial review, there would be no need for the council to be represented because it would be for the Secretary of State to defend his decision.
Thank you. That helps with clarification. And just as a matter of interest, if anybody watched Country File on Sunday, there was quite a big article about solar farms. So if you haven't got it, watch it on catch up.
Thank you for that tangent, but interesting point, Councillor Lippert. Country File. Okay, right, thank you. Please continue.
I don't think there's anything further unless members have any further questions about any of this. That we've got all the solar farm applications in the offing. We do have one at Wandon End near Luton Airport, and that is scheduled at the moment to be reported to committee on the 27th of June. Okay, but all being well, once again.
Shall I go on to item 8, which is current enforcement notices? May I welcome Christella Menson, who is new to us. Welcome.
Pleased to meet everyone. Thank you. I'm pleased to be here this evening as the newly appointed team lead for the planning enforcement team. I trust the chair and members have had sight of the reports. Thought this was a really good opportunity for me to meet yourselves and also for you to have some insight in terms of what we're doing as the newly established team and to get some understanding of what's happening and what's operating within this transition phase as we work to build, develop into our new structure and the newly established team. So just in summary then, what we thought would be really helpful to do is just to present the information to you in a slightly different format to what members may have been used to previously, and just to offer some insight of how we're working to deliver on our planning enforcement objectives in line with the corporate objectives as well. So one of the things that we did want to highlight to you and to just the feedback is the approach that we are taking. We are maintaining an approach where we're seeking to negotiate and to resolve breaches through informal negotiation. We appreciate that that can be a protracted process, but we do remain focused on removing harm and removing blight on the streetscape and the landscape to get compliance with the planning regulations first and foremost. As part of that, we recognise that a pragmatic approach is required. We also recognise and prioritise those really high profile cases, those really important pieces around listed buildings, developments in the Greenbelt as well. And also one of the things we do recognise is as we get towards the summer months, for reasons that I've not been able to explain, we seem to have lots of advertising that creeps up around as well. So it's about just keeping on top of that, just setting out a really clear plan, how we're going to work forward together as a team. The newly established team works together with the conservation officers, and that's a really good union. So that means that we can have the resources in the right place, working collaboratively and working in a progressive way to resolve and bring our listed buildings back into the condition that we actually need them to be in, and to take proportionate action where development does not fall in line with the corporate aspirations. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. That report is for noting. Sorry, have we got any questions? No? Reports for noting? Item 9, exclusion of press and public. I propose that under section 100A of the Local Government Act 1972, the press and public be excluded from the meeting on the grounds that the following report will involve the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in paragraph 7 of part 1 of schedule 12A of the said act as amended. Can I have a seconder, please?
Yes, I'm happy to second that.
Can we go into part 2, please? Oh, sorry, got to vote. Can we vote on that, please?
Yeah, that motion is carried, Chair.
Thank you. Wait a few moments till we. Beautifully on Monday. Thank you. We're now back into part 1, and I would like to close the meeting. This is the final PC meeting of the civic year. I think we're all up for re-election. So see you on the other side. Thank you.